Good morning and welcome to Citizen Extra. I am Anne Kiguta. As always, we're going to be taking you across the country where news is breaking. We want to start by giving you a heads up on the stories that we're following for you this morning. In the news today, political parties continue to hear appeals from the recently concluded party nominations. We shall be relaying some of those verdicts that are being issued by both Jubilee Party and ODM in the course of the day. On the other hand, the rush to go it alone continues as aspirants work to meet the deadline set by the IEBC for independent candidates. The Register of Political Parties says the numbers are increasing by the day. We'll be telling you why in this program. Also in the news today, the World Press Freedom Day is being celebrated across the world. In Kenya, the celebrations are being held in Nairobi under the global theme, Critical Minds for Critical Times. The media's role in advancing peaceful, just and inclusive societies. We'll be joining in on those celebrations a little later. And in politics, we look at the threats by the National Super Alliance to boycott the August 8th polls following an appeal by the IEBC to have an earlier decision by the courts to declare that presidential poll results announced at the constituency tallying centers be deemed final. We'll be talking about that in this program. And still in the news, Wiper Democratic Movement leader Kalonzo Musyoka is expected to address allegations that his foundation has been under-declaring donor funds it receives. This follows a decision by the NGO Coordination Board to freeze the foundation's accounts. And finally, in the financial markets, the Kenya Bankers Association is launching a campaign to encourage customers to embrace digital payments. We'll be telling you more about this bid. So that and much more coming up in the course of the next 3 hours. So I want to introduce some of the guests I'll be speaking to this morning. Tony Kiprotich just lost in the Jubilee primaries. He's vying for the Turbo constituency seat and will be going forward as an independent candidate. We'll be talking about the independents very shortly. Joy Mudivo is a governance expert and once again joins us in the program. Later on, we are hoping to speak to Rachel Shebesh, who's the incumbent women's representative for Nairobi. We'll be talking about her bid very shortly. But first, we want to cross over to Orange House now, where our reporter Stephen Letoy is standing by. Of course, the aftermath of nominations is really a thorn in the flesh for many political parties. Parties are also still trying to resolve disputes that stemmed from those political issues. So he's following up the political parties Tribunal at ODM and joins us now with an update. Stephen.
Well, a very good morning to you, Anne Kiguta, there in studio. Indeed, it's a thorny in the flesh of the Orange Democratic Movement, especially having to resolve all the disputes or petitions that arose from the just concluded party primaries. Remember, Anne, today is technically the last day for those who are seeking to go the independent way, but political parties, including ODM, appears to be dragging the hearings and the conclusion of all the petitions, so that now those who will not have found justice or those who will not have found their way in the appeals tribunal of the party would now consider filing their papers at the Register of Political Parties and subsequently with the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission for them to be cleared to vie as independent candidates. And so we are at Orange House, and little is going on for now, but we are told that any time from now this place will be flooded with aspirants who are coming to collect their certificates or who are coming to see what rulings the appeals tribunal was able to make against or for their petitions that they lodged with the appeals tribunal of the ODM party. And so, for instance, yesterday the political parties dispute resolution, which is a section of the High Court yesterday, barred this party, that is ODM, from declaring the results of Kisumu County, barring particularly the party from declaring Senator Peter Anyang' Nyong'o as the winner of the Kisumu gubernatorial race. And so we are waiting also to see what the appeals tribunal was able to make of a Siaya gubernatorial seat. We saw the other day clearing a call for Bado to vie for the Migori gubernatorial seat. And so several other constituencies, 3 of them yesterday cleared, that is Nyatike, Kisumu East, and Kasipul and Kasipul Kabondo. Those rulings were made yesterday, and the writings were given to candidates and forwarded to the party's National Elections Board, and that rulings are what is supposed to be acted upon today. Remember also, Anne, there has been a friction between the National Elections Board chaired by Judith Pareno and that of the Appeals Board, trying to giving contradicting information or contradicting verdicts on the petitions that arose from the just concluded party nominations. And so even aspirants yesterday raising an alarm that the appeals or the rulings that were given by the Appeals Tribunal were not being acted upon by the National Elections Board, delaying the process. Remember, if you were to go for an independent candidate, it means today you should be preparing your papers, because tomorrow, the 4th, is the last day for you to submit those papers for preparation or to be acted upon by the IEBC before they are gazetted on the 8th of August. And so on, we are going to keep an eye both at Orange House and at the Gracia Hotel Gardens, where the Appeals Tribunal is racing against time to conclude all the petitions that were lodged before it by various candidates from Governor, Senator, Woman Representative for Migori also, and also the members of the county assemblies also are before that particular tribunal. And so that is what we are keeping an eye for you, Anne, today. And now I hand you back to studio. Anne.
Thanks very much, Stephen, for that. Joining me now is governance expert Joy Mudiva. Joy, I wanted to talk a little bit about the party's dispute resolution process. And you've heard from Stephen that, aspirants basically have just a day, to make their decision, file papers, etc., if they're going to go it alone in these elections. Is it in the interests of political parties to drag on these tribunal sittings for as long as possible to lock out those who would be unhappy with the outcome of such a process?
Certainly, because the trend so far has been, for those who deem the process not to be fair or who are aggrieved by the outcomes, we have seen an avalanche of people, even big names like Honorable Musila and others, choosing to resign and go the independent way. And what that does, even in an area that is a stronghold, for example, of the particular party, if you have two strong candidates who are both supporting the presidential ticket but are splitting the vote at the parliamentary level, for example, then you can lose a seat that would have been one of your stronghold seats to another party simply because of the split in between. Because we've seen that also with Jubilee. The tribunals are trying to do as much as they can, as fast as they can, but some rulings are being deferred, for example, until Friday. So this is something, in my reading, is something that the parties are trying to do to preserve their turf and to preserve their strongholds, for example. So by the time the decision comes out, it is too late for a candidate to jump ship. The other thing that I'm reading into the situation also is the fact that there are really very many matters that have come up for determination, and so it is only humanly possible to do so much. So there might be a push in some of the areas to delay the rulings, but in some other areas it could just be that it is humanly impossible to handle the avalanche that has come in. Look at what we are seeing at Orange House. If you drive by Orange House or if you drive by Gracia Gardens, you'd think there's a wedding because of the throng that the people that are there. But it's just because there are just so many people with so many issues and everybody's case is urgent that I think, frankly, the tribunals must be overwhelmed, working round the clock, trying to get all the decisions out. And therefore, is it,
still in the interest of parties that candidates basically lose hope in having a quick dispensation of or arbitration of these matters and just choose to go the independent way?
Let's just backtrack a little bit. Where this stems from is from the fact that the parties were unable to deliver credible primaries to begin with. Because if the primaries were credible in the eyes of the participants, then a loser might have been more inclined to accept the verdict than when the process seemed to have irregularities and they were not addressed in time before a final declaration is made. But now that we have seen that there is this particular weakness, I think people feel, like I said here before, because the ticket is so lucrative, if you win this ticket, This means, for example, if you're in a Jubilee stronghold, you have your work cut out for elections, or if you're in an ODM stronghold, your work is cut out for elections. Because it is so lucrative, it is so do or die, you find people are very, very vested in the outcome of the primaries process. But now that there is dissatisfaction in the ranks, the only way out is to run as an independent. So if you find, for example, that you're a strong candidate and there were perceived irregularities and you do not see that they are being addressed to your satisfaction, and you're convinced that you still have the support of the people on the ground, then this was a little valve that was opened by the drafters of the law for people to be able to run as independent candidates. Of course, because the gazettement is on the 8th, there's nothing that stops people from presenting papers after the 8th. However, the law says that before the general election, you have to have 3 months where you're not a party member. So if you're a party member today and you cannot resign by today, so that by tomorrow you can be registered as an independent candidate, then you'd find yourself locked out of August 8th polls. You may be able to run for other things, but for August 8th, that would be a no-no for you.
Finally, Joy, before we shift gears slightly and focus on independence, how critical are the operations of the tribunal to the larger harmony of the party, and do their decisions in any way affect the kind of support that the leaders of parties can expect when it comes to the presidential race?
Justice is something that must not only be served, but must be seen to be served. If somebody feels that they have gone through a fair process and they have come out on top, or even if they have lost, but they can understand why they have lost, usually they would still be able to consolidate their position and to remain faithful in the party. At the beginning, we saw a lot of talk like this in Jubilee, where people are saying that they will stick together. And we've seen that also in ODM, in some areas where the losers have considered, for example, in Kandui, where Sifuna said, you know what, the party is bigger than the man and I will live to fight another day. And it is important for these tribunals to remain like Julius Caesar's wife, above suspicion, so that the decisions that they deliver are deemed to be credible. This credibility is what will be able to help them to consolidate the support of the... Because remember, you're running as an MCA or you're running as an MP, but those who are your supporters also form part of the presidential tally. And in the big picture, for both NASA and Jubilee, the big prize is State House. And so if they're able to keep their supporters within their purview, then they are able to consolidate their position towards the presidential tally. You've seen, for example, what happened in Kisumu East, where the people are saying, you know what, if you're not able to resolve our situation the way we want it, tell Jubilee to come. We will wear the T-shirts. We will vote for Uhuru. Such chants are something that people in the headquarters don't want to see, because you want your supporters to remain with you until the end. So the tribunals have a very important role to keep people invested in the process and satisfied that their party has done the best they can to deliver the best credible translation to the people's will. And that's why these tribunals are critical in political party life.
We're going to return to the question of the political parties' dispute resolution mechanism and whether we've come of age a little later in the program. But let's shift gears momentarily to a related topic, which is the question of the rush for independent tickets. And joining me now is Tony Kiprotich, who just lost in the Jubilee primaries for Turbo. Nonetheless, he is determined to go it in this race on August 8th. Javas Bigambo, who's a political and governance expert, is also with us this morning. I want to begin with you, Tony. Joy has talked about parties delivering a credible process in the primaries, and that being so important when it comes to dispute resolution, perhaps even minimizing the cases at the end of the day. Do you understand why you lost the Turbo race? Do you believe you lost it?
Thank you very much. To start with, I want to correct the fact that I lost in the Jubilee primaries. Jubilee primaries were not as fair as we expected, and I had seen that before we got into the primaries level. And that is why, as early as last month, I decided that I was going to run as an independent candidate, seeing that the incoming Jubilee primaries at that time were not going to be free and fair. And as witnessed in the just concluded primaries, the level of credibility was not up to standards. And that is why, at this point in time...
These specifics, what malpractices did you witness in the turbo race?
Case in point in Turbo, the primaries was not fair because the ballot papers in some station arrived late. And the second issue was that there was very many malpractices, but most of those malpractices were around deliveries of the ballot boxes and the ballot papers. The voters, all the voters didn't get to vote. Some of them were locked out, and that is why most and some of the aspirants.
And yet, sorry, I just want to follow your train of thought. Yet you're saying that a month to these polls, you had decided that you're going to go it independently because you did not believe that process would be free or fair.
Yes.
But the question of delivery of ballot papers is only something that you would have known on the date of the election, which may lead one to question whether you're just a sore loser, that you saw you were not going to possibly be the winner of that particular race and decided going independent is the only way.
Just to answer that, one of the things that we had foreseen with the Jubilee nominations was that Jubilee, first of all, had no register. They had to adopt the IBC register as their register. And for a credible nomination process, I think it would have been fair enough to engage the members of a political party to decide whom they were going to vote as their flag bearer. And that opened up other members from other parties to participate in Jubilee nominations. And therefore, for that reason, members of other parties came in to vote an aspirant in Jubilee who was not even favorite among people of Turbo constituency. So those are some of the reasons as to why I decided as early last month to contest as an independent candidate in Turbo constituency.
Just a final question to you, Tony, before I open it up. There are those who will go further and say not only are those running as independents sore losers, but they are trying to impose themselves on the people who have already decided in the primary contest that they don't want them as leaders. How do you respond to that?
What I can say regarding that issue is we understand that the people who voted in nominations are the same people who are going to vote in August polls. But then, if an aspirant believes that the exercise was not credible, that the exercise was not free and fair, I think it would be fair enough for him or her to join in as an independent candidate or pursue a party tribunal process, so that if irregularities were witnessed, then they make a decision to reverse what happened during nomination. So for me, I think for those who think that they were rigged out and they cannot find time to clear with the party, it is good for them to run as an independent candidate, for them to have a second chance to face other aspirants in the August polls.
Let me bring in Javas to the conversation. Javas, good morning. And
morning.
In your estimation, what is fueling this rush for independent tickets, if you like?
Well, it is a mixture of various factors. One, the improper understanding of what actually informed in democratic spaces what independent candidature should be. And secondly, it's a question of disgruntlement on how political parties, through their tribunals, have not properly handled the disputes that have arisen out of the party primaries. While it's okay for individuals to offer themselves to the electorate as independent candidates, without the silver lining of hypocrisy, because people don't understand, some candidates don't understand that when you choose to vie or to run for political office as an independent, it purely demonstrates that you are not dependent on any ideological leaning to a political party. And running for political office as an independent candidate should not purely be a function of disgruntlement out of how the political party has handled or mishandled the dispute or the anomalies within a party primary. And then it's also important for people to appreciate that getting into a political party and then, or being a member of a political party and then withdrawing from the same, say after primaries or in the run-up to the primaries, then you say you are independent, then I think we are just using the avenue. Of course, the law provides for it, but purely being used as an avenue to run for political office without the ideological underpinnings that inform party affiliation or independent candidature.
Do you believe that independents are sore losers?
Well, no.
And should they, you know, because we've just spoken, to Tony, who has conceded that the same people who took part in the party primaries are the same people who are going to vote at the end of the day. So by that logic, if they rejected you at the primary stage, then you can expect them to, you know, all factors to remain constant, that they'll reject you in
I'll
August.
pick an issue and puncture an argument that Tony advanced, that, for example, in Tarbo constituency, that it was evident people were going to vote for an individual who was not a favorite amongst the contestants. What scale did he use to determine who is favorite amongst all the candidates, among the, to and for the people? Because it is up to the people to determine whom they want to vote for, and that can only happen during an election or during the primaries, and that came to pass. But of course, I think that it is proper that some who feel that the victory was stolen from them, then they may want to use a different avenue that is provided for in law, and that avenue is contesting for a political seat as an independent candidate, which is altogether proper. Only when you feel that actually you had the overwhelming support and it's evident in record, but because of various intervening factors within the political framework, the victory was stolen from you. But a situation where somebody runs for office and the records are there and clear that the electorate did not prefer such a candidate, but because of, say, political ego, because of imagining that it could be possibly different the general election, you choose to run as an independent, such candidates may find themselves in even greater surprises when we go to the general election, because pushing on when the will of the people has been clear through the primaries, then such individuals may find that during the August elections, they may even garner fewer votes than what they got during the primaries.
Yeah, Joy, let me bring you in on that point, because some also question just how smart this move is. A lot of aspirants have, at least in the first stage of this election contest, spent millions of shillings and still lost the ticket. And then now you have somebody who's deciding to vie as an independent in an area where the party on which they had hoped to gain a ticket is a strong party. I mean, is the calculation sound? Can we actually expect in this election to see independents take seats where political parties are established and strong?
It's a very expensive process running for office in Kenya, and that's one of the things that I wish we would have a culture change, where you have more people running because they are good and credible leaders, not because they have deep pockets. But what you're saying is actually true, because those who run on the party ticket have a lot of support from the party. There's a lot of work that will be done by the presidential campaign that will buoy them during the final election. And so running as an independent, you're basically saying it is you and your family's resources and all your friends who would choose to support you that are going to propel you forward. So it can be one of those decisions that could actually ruin you financially, might even be able to run you down in your health. But on the other hand, if, for example, during the primaries, you had a very strong showing, and you are sure that it is only as a result of some malpractices that you are rigged out, it might actually end up being a very smart step. And what it does for you, even especially if you're successful, then you're not beholden to anybody, or rather to any patronage for your victory. You can stand as your own man and make, for example, if it is voting on the floor of the House, you can vote for whichever side of the divide because you go in as a free agent. But there's another aspect, and that I want to capture. There are those who chose from the outset to run as independents. They did not lose from a party primary for them to become an independent. Those did not even bother with the primaries. from the get-go, they have been doing their campaigns and telling people, I am not a part of any of the divide. They might say, for example, I support a particular presidential candidate, but as an aspirant, I am standing on my own 2 feet. And those ones made an educated and calculated move from the beginning. So, for example, they did not lose party nomination fees, for example, or paying expensive party membership so that they can be absorbed into a party. So there are those who have used their resources from the onset knowing that they're running as independents, but the ones who lost and now are running as independents stand to suffer double jeopardy even at this stage. And if they lose the August 8th election, it could be financially catastrophic for them.
Right. But Tony, what do you think of that, listening to that? How much did you invest first in at the nomination stage in your campaign? And how confident are you that you have, one, the resources, and two, the support on the ground to actually win if you go it independent in Turbo?
I agree the fact that those people who participated in the just concluded primaries have been crippled to their heels financially. However, also in the same note, those people who clinched party tickets will have an easy ride, except on few cases.
How much did you spend?
For me, the idea of spending was not that big, with a person who had decided already that he is going on an independent ticket. So to this far, not a lot of money, just movements. I've not spent much, to be sincere. Yes, and
that's not an answer, but go ahead.
Okay, just to go on. The idea of independent candidates will depend on the brand. If you are a brand, and if you've sold yourself in the constituency or in the ward level, then it will be very easy for you to go through in the August polls. But then the issue of party comes in. We know how the politics of this country is done. There are those people who will clinch the seat through a soft process by them being in the party. But then I know there are going to be very many scenarios in very many constituencies where independent candidates will be favored.
All right. I want to return to a point, Javas, that Joy had made, which was talking about the literal independence of independent candidates if elected once they are in legislative or other assemblies, you know, the free will, because they're not beholden to any interest. How would a growing number of independents, should they be elected come August, affect the political landscape and affect the ability of either side of the house, so to speak, in terms of pushing forward agenda?
As a prelude to my answer to your question, first, I think it does not make sense for an individual who is running as an independent candidate for political office to claim to support a presidential candidate. Because the moment you are running as an independent, you do not want to behold yourself to any ideological leaning of a presidential candidate who belongs to a party. So if at all you support a particular presidential candidate, then it would have made sense for you to belong to that political party altogether.
Come now, you're in the middle of central Kenya. You're going to say you won't support President Uhuru's candidature?
But the thing is this, if indeed one supports his candidature, then one not belong to that party.
Because you lost, and
exactly.
There are two different matters. Winning the constituency seat, sorry, it's because I'm quite interested in your argument. Yes. Winning the constituency seat is one issue. The presidential issue is entirely another.
But you see, it's tethered to the whole thing. Because if somebody, say, lost at the primaries of that party, and it also means that the party has got the favorite candidate within that contest, who is the candidate of that party, then even if such candidate claims that they support the presidential candidature of, say, President Kenyatta in the central region, and yet President Kenyatta, who is in the Jubilee party, will be, in fact, it behooves him to support and campaign for the lineup within the Jubilee party, then such individual who is an independent candidate, even claiming or hanging onto the coattail of the president by demonstrating his support, may not really amount to much, unless, like I've argued earlier, such individual had overwhelming support, and irregularities within the primaries cost that person the victory that was perhaps due to him or to her. Only in such cases then will such a person find it possibly easier in any case to run all the way to the ballot and possibly win. Now, getting back to your question, if or in the event that independent candidates get to win lots of seats, say even at the legislature,
right?
One, I think it would be very generous imagination to assume that now and even moving forward, we will have majority in a house, whether at a county assembly or even at the national level, being independent candidates. That itself would have demonstrated that political parties as institutions are on the decline, which actually may not be the case, at least not now, not in the foreseeable future. But we must appreciate that we are going to see fairly an increase in independent candidates winning offices as compared to the past election in 2013. That is going to be a possible reality because in 2013 we had at least very few, though negligible but very few numbers, who won office at the National Assembly and represented their various constituencies. But the challenge arises. For instance, entertain this imagination. Somebody who runs as an independent for office of governor and then gets to win that seat. We know very well how important that office is. And that individual wants to have the budgets of the county passed, various preferred pieces of legislation debated and passed. If such a person who is an independent does not have a way of working, by compromise of course, with the members of the assembly, then we are going to find an executive or a governor in that case who will always be at the mercy of the assembly represented by various parties. Now, if it's a question of Senate or even the National Assembly, then you find that if somebody is an independent, then the challenge of being members of various house committees will be an issue that they want to think through, because it is parties that sit and nominate and propose individuals who go to sit in house committees. Independent candidates will have to find a way to deliberate, to negotiate, to belong to party houses, to house committees that play oversight and other critical roles, as it is the responsibility of members of the National Assembly or say members of the Senate. So it is a path that is new. It is a path that is untrodden much and unexplored within our democratic space, and therefore it's going to be a very interesting spectacle to witness. But I do not want to be very charitable with the imagination to assume that in 2017 we are going to have majority members of any house at any time or in any county who are independent candidates.
Certainly, I don't think anybody imagines that even the spread of the independent candidates is limited, so it wouldn't lend itself to that sort of result in August. But nonetheless, Joy, with a growing majority, if at all one could argue that there will be a growing majority of independents in the next Parliament, how does that affect the political landscape, even if you were to get perhaps 10% or % of the House being independent?
Okay, first, before I answer your question, let me respond to something that Jarvis has said that I don't quite agree with.
Okay.
As an independent candidate, there's nothing that stops you from supporting any other or aligning yourself with other politicians, even if they belong to political parties. The reason is simply synergy, and it is of political survival. Like you pointed out, if you're in central Kenya, you're not going to go around saying, I'm an independent candidate and I don't care who wins the presidential election. You're not going to win anything. You have to align yourself with someone. And even when you get into the House, you have to work with people in political parties to be able to deliver for your own constituents. So it's one of those things where you may not be beholden to the party, but as an agent of the people, you must align yourself with the political party that is closest with the aspirations of the people who you represent and that you can live with as a politician. Because at the end of the day, political parties are still the primary vehicle by which we access power in our country today, in our reality today. And even if you're a governor who's an independent, you may not be able to access the big party machinery, but for your county assembly, it should even stand you in better stead because you're able to work with both sides of the divide or however many parties make it, maybe in an area where you've got 3 or 4 strong parties, you're able to straddle everybody and bring everybody in. For example, the grumblings that we've had about, for example, Governor Kidero being too Jubilee at some point during his career because he chose to cooperate with national government, such rumblings will not be there because you don't belong to either side. So it might actually make your work easier. But moving away from that now, coming to your question, independents form a very important block in the elected positions, because when you go, for example, in this, just the parliament that's whose life is coming to a close, there was always the argument for the tyranny of numbers, that you always knew how the argument was going to go, because people are going to marshal the numbers of their supporters to be able to push the agenda through. What independents do for you is you've got some wriggle room where these guys can argue for either side, and so they are open to be courted by both sides of the argument, for the bill or against the bill, or for some policy or against the policy, and that will be important in helping to shift the scales of balance towards the side where, let's say, public interest lies. So because in some instances where there's a party position that has been taken, the chief whip has done their job properly, and everybody in the party is towing the party line, like what we saw with the party hopping rule law. When there was some diddle-daddle about it, a PG was called, people went, the president read the Riot Act, guys trooped back to parliament and they voted the thing in. Now, such things might be able to be curtailed because you have these people who, if you're calling a PG, they are not part of your constituency. So they have to be wooed or convinced on a more base level. So it might help to move politics forward in a positive manner by breaking down some of those strongholds and enclaves, by introducing a new enclave. On the other hand, it might also be something that those might be the renegades, you know, that the guys who are not disciplined by anyone.
Right.
If you just want to introduce some random bill, catch one of these guys, talk to him nicely, and they just go, you know, shooting off everywhere because they are, after all,
guns for
independent.
hire.
So it might actually, it would be interesting to see how it plays out. And for sure the numbers will be more. Now, right now we have 4. For sure we'll have more than 10, in my estimation, in the next parliament. And a few governors possibly.
Tony, finally, what is it that you believe independent candidates offer the electorate away, aside from what mainstream political parties preach?
Commenting on what my friend has just said, in the next parliament, it is a fact that we are going to have a sizable number of independent candidates in parliament. And given the fact that they can play on either side, independent candidates will shape how the agendas of the House will run. Because you can imagine that they are free from party headlines. They cannot take a specific position on a bill that is introduced or an agenda that wants to be passed. So I see that in the next parliament, things will be quite different from what we witnessed in the last parliament. Also, I also want to point out that the way the next parliament will be run will depend on the unity of independent aspirants. Currently, as we stand, we have independent candidates we've come together so that we can chart a way forward during this political campaign. And I think we will have a good discourse even after the general elections. So that remains to be seen only after the August polls. All
right, and I thank you for your views. Tony Kiprotich, lost in the Jubilee primaries for Turbo. He's going independent come August. Joy and Javas will be staying with me, and in the next hour we'll be catching up with our Hassan Mugambi, who will be standing by at the Jubilee Party headquarters, where of course tribunal sittings are also underway. Jackie Maribe, I believe, is also standing by. She's going to be at the Register of Political Parties, where they're receiving huge numbers of aspirants hoping to go into independent in August. Stay with Citizen Extra. We're back after the break.